Welcome back everybody, this is your third video over Java programming. This video, my goal is to help you understand all of this stuff. And this is honestly probably where most people quit. So congratulations on being better than like 95% of the people that watch these videos. Alright, now to covering all of this crap. So if you're new to Java development, you can kind of ignore everything above this line and everything below this line and just kind of put your code here in the middle. And a lot of beginners do that. But you guys know that my principle here is that I want to help you guys understand why we're doing things and how it's working rather than just what to type. So I'm not going to ignore this stuff. So before you start learning what all these terms mean, I just recommend you go in here and start changing things and see how it affects your program. Now my goal is to help you guys understand everything here. But one thing I wanted to tell you guys is that at some point you're going to X out of something important and you're going to be annoyed because you're not going to know how to get it back. That happens to me all the time. So if that's the case, what you need to do is you need to go up here to the top and go to Window, Perspective, Reset Perspective. And that's just going to get everything from the fresh start that we had at the very beginning. So now we can go and open our code again. So now that you know how to protect yourself in the case of failure, let's get started. The first thing that you need to know is that everything is inside of a class, and each class has a name. We named it MySuiteProgram. Inside of classes, we have what are known as methods. So this is an example of a method. Just like a class has a name, MySuiteProgram, well, all of your methods are going to have a name as well. And in this case, our method is called main. The technical name for this right here is an identifier. So our class has an identifier and our method has an identifier. Inside of our method, we execute statements. So this is an example of a statement. And throughout this series, you're going to learn all kinds of different statements. So it's kind of like this nesting doll. The biggest thing here is the class, and then inside of the class, we can have a method, and then inside of the method, we can have statements. Another thing you should know is that this method is an example of a member. So every single thing that's part of this class, MySuiteProgram, is known as a member. So you can say that the contents are the members of this class. We could go in here and add more members. So for example, and if you don't understand all the syntax, that's cool, don't worry. Here we are creating a new member, so now we have two members. We have a method, which is called main, and then we have a string, which is called X. And this string is an example of a property, by the way. So we have methods, and then we have properties. Methods usually do something, so in this case it's printing to the console. Properties just store some value. For example, I could store the value hello. And just to run this, make sure I don't got any issues. Yeah, it's still working. So you can see this nesting concept in our code. So for example, for this statement right here, we have this system class, and then inside of the system class, we can access its members using this dot. And one of those members is called out. And out has a member print line, which is a method. So you can see how you just have to understand that the structure consists of classes which contain members, and those members can be properties or methods. All right, so now I'm just going to get rid of this and kind of go back to how we had it at the beginning. Okay, so what about this public stuff? Well, these are known as access modifiers. And there's some different options. So for example, we could put private, which that's actually not going to work. So we get an error when we make it private because every single executable Java program needs to have a public method called main. But just so you know, for future development, we can change this access modifier to different things. And basically this determines who can access this method, or who can access this class in this case, because this class is public. So when we have a really complex Java application, we're gonna have multiple classes, and these classes will interact with one another, and you can control that access by using these different access modifiers, such as public or private and so forth. Another thing you guys should understand is the use of these curly braces. When are we supposed to use curly braces? And Eclipse is kind of cool because if you click one of these curly braces, it's going to make a box around the matching closing curly brace. So you can kind of think of it, if I just got rid of all of this, here is our class structure, and then everything inside of these curly braces is part of this class. Then we do a similar thing inside of here with the method, and everything inside of this curly brace and this curly brace is part of that method. And just by convention, we indent everything that's inside of curly braces. And when I say convention, I just mean that it's very, very common. Everyone does it, but it's not necessarily required. Because I could go in here and I could not indent all of this stuff here, and I can save it and I can run it and it still works. But the issue is that it's not clear what's going on here, because developers just know that, hey, this is in a class, this should be indented. So if it's not, you're going to introduce confusion. And the only other thing I wanted to talk about in this video is this static keyword. And this is one of those things that's a little bit more hard to explain without a lot of the back knowledge of object-oriented programming. We're going to dive into object-oriented programming deep in this series, but just so you guys know, Java is an example of an object-oriented programming language. In an object-oriented programming language, we basically will create instances of classes. So you can consider a class like this blueprint. It's like a factory that makes these objects. And this probably is like making absolutely no sense if you've never really gotten into object-oriented programming before. But all this static keyword is saying is that, hey, we don't actually have to create any instances to use this method here. So if we created a different method, let me just copy paste this, and we'll just call this something really creative. And I'm just going to get rid of this here. We'll talk about that soon too. And I'm going to get rid of this static keyword. And we're just going to make this say, hello there, tacos. If we wanted to run this tacos method or call it, we would have to do it like, so by doing this, we're creating an instance of that class. And then we could say x.tacos like that. And now when we run this application, it says, hello there, tacos. So this whole concept of this new and then putting your class name, well, this is creating an object. But this main method has this static keyword. And what that means is that this step does not have to happen. And that's similar to this print line method, because we're not creating an instance of this. We're not saying new system and then giving it a variable name and then calling print line on it. We're just calling it directly, and that's made possible because of this static keyword. So I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of all this. All right, and also if you guys didn't realize this, you can put 2 forward slashes to make a comment. This is going to be ignored and it's not going to execute anything. So I'm going to use comments to sum up this video and say all of the key terms you guys need to know. So the first thing is a class. A class contains everything and has members. The examples of members are methods, which do something, and then properties, which store something. These things can be given an access modifier. In this case, they're public. So that's this right here. This defines what code can use this. And then lastly, we had static, which means no instance of the class is needed, which brings up the term object, which is just an instance of a class. And these last few here can be a little bit confusing without first learning some basic Java. So we're going to get into these a lot more in the upcoming videos. So before I go, I just wanted to say that we have created this main function. So this means that we created this section of code that someone can call and say, hey, we want to run everything inside of main. And then it's going to go through and execute all of the statements. And a statement is just telling the computer to do something. So we've defined this main function, but how exactly does it get called? Well, the way it works is that the main function always gets executed automatically when we execute our program. That means if we change the name of this thing to something totally different and then tried to run our program, it's not going to know where to start. It says right here, please define the main method. So that means every single program at some point is going to need a main method. And there is an exception to that, which is if you're just creating some code that can be used by other programs, so like a library, well then you don't need a point to start executing. You can just basically make all these resources for people to use. Okay, so in the next video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about what this is right here. And these are known as arguments. And in the next video, we're gonna talk about how we can use these arguments to make our program a bit more dynamic. So hopefully by the end of that video and maybe a few more videos in, you have a really solid understanding of all the foundational Java content. So let me know what you guys think. Was this video too much? Did you like getting everything up front, or do you think it'd been better to space this content out over some more videos? like I said, we're going to go back and we're going to touch on each one of these topics in a lot of detail. So don't feel like you have to have everything memorized or understand every piece of it. Just get the basics and understand that this is the foundation of a Java program.